Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jerry. You can all hear me down at the back, yeah? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so to kick off the tonight's event, I just thought I would get the panel to start off by giving some of their thoughts on a united Ireland, and can it ever be a warm house for unionism? So I'll start with David and work my way down the panel. So David.
I was going, hopefully he doesn't start with me. Can it be a warm house for unionists? Absolutely, no question, it can be. I actually think that it has to be a warm house for society in general rather than unionism. I grew up, just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in a Presbyterian manse. My dad's a Presbyterian minister. Met my wife there, and so my early years were through the Presbyterian Church, and that kind of until sort of we had our own kids, and then we joined the GA club, and our life now is sort of right across the community. So if you're asking me, can Ireland be a warm house for unionists, the thing I would have to just point out as well is Protestants and unionists aren't always exactly equal in the same thing. So for me, I absolutely believe it can be, but it has to be a society that's on the basis of a strong economy and education and health issues, and it becomes all those issues that will open up the debate, and the detail of those will open up the debate, and will it's very easy. How to describe it? It's very easy for, I was here on the leaders' debate, and Mary Lou was absolutely phenomenal. She was really brilliant at coming across. But it's very easy to put an argument to people on one level, which is simplistic and what you want. But it's very different to put it to another group of people that require detail and understanding and reassurance, and education, for example, would be a massive one. So it's the detail of that needs to come out to whether it can be, but it absolutely can, if that answers the question.
Thank you, David. Okay, I'll pass it over to Sophie, and your thoughts on can a United Ireland be a warm house for unionists?
Okay, so thanks very much again for having me here. I've always felt like made very welcome, and there've always been a lot of very stimulating events at the Féile. It's classic. I'd love to have had something like this in East Belfast whenever I was growing up, so well done to the organisers. So, is the mic not working? Use that one. So it probably can be a warm house for unionists, but what I'd ask Republicans to think, and I have to bear in mind that there are lots of different types of Republicans, right? So I know I'm not just speaking to Sinn Féin or the SDLP, or there's lots of shades of republicanism that, previously the house that you were in was a British house, and you didn't have a very nice time there, right? And some people weren't even able to have their own house because of their religion. And now, all of a sudden, because of a number of different factors, you're building this new house and inviting these people in who aren't sure if you're going to take care of them. So there's been a big transformation of the power relationship between Irish republicanism and British unionism. And so while it's an exciting and fun project to craft a new state for the group that now get to do that, it's probably, and I know it is, quite an insecure position for a lot of other people to be in. And I'm not talking about, RUC men who behaved badly during the conflict, or members of the British cabinet who neglected to look after citizens here who weren't Protestant or British. I'm talking about regular unionists who live in Ballysullen or Cherry Valley, and who are just not quite sure what this state's going to look like. So one of the things that I think that Irish Republicans should think about is that this is kind of uncharted territory for unionists, and they're probably quite uncomfortable. I was just trying to keep it concise and think of a couple of key points. And one of the first ones I'd ask is really, how serious are you as an Irish Republican about co-creating a society of equals? So do you see unionists who you want to bring into this new state as truly equal to you? Like, do you love them as brothers and sisters? Are they your equals? Is their political identity legitimate? And if that's the case, then, good, go ahead and involve them in co-creating a new society. But if it's a consultation exercise, and if after the fact, unionists and loyalists will be managed as a security problem, as Mark Daly set out in his report recently, that's not a society of equals at all. That's the oppressed occupying the role of the oppressor, which often happens in history. So for it to be a warm house, there's lots of different things that have to happen, but one of the things that might help is providing a route to rejoin Britain for unionists, so that this isn't a kind of, now you're in a United Ireland, and that is the end of that, and you will rely on us to treat you benevolently. And then the other kind of thing I'd ask is, and I'm really interested in this because it's either the Union or United Ireland, but why? So if as an Irish Republican you have a well-developed idea of the current problems facing society, like inequality, violence, poverty, political disengagement, the rise of the far right, whatever your analysis is, why is this specific territorial unit, Ireland as one, the answer to those problems? Because you're going to have to persuade people of that. And if you don't know why yourself, if you've just been brought up to believe that, in the same way that lots of loyalists and unionists have been brought up to believe the union's good, then you'll not be able to sell it to anybody else, and you won't create a very good society. So, yeah, there's just a couple of points. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Jim.
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed. You do wonder why I am here, but I do like to live the passion of my times, and that we are in a very interesting place at the moment, and we are where we are. I do think it's interesting that you're asking this question when, in fact, basically it was blown by unionism for 50 years that didn't make nationalists feel very warm. And certainly then for the last 20 years they haven't really done much better at it. And so I think that is the situation. Whereas if you look at the Republic of Ireland, there are many people in there who feel very great a kinship to the Republic of Ireland, but still are a wee bit West British. They still watch the royal weddings, etc., etc. But they're accommodated very well. I mean, it is interesting that if at the end of the day there are many parties in the south and in the north that espouse a United Ireland, but once that happens, and it does look like it's going to happen sometime, and we can talk about that later on, then that issue is dead. It's gone. Sinn Féin become a left-wing socialist party. Great. I was a member of the Labour Party back in the 60s. My mother's cousin was David Blakely, a Labour MP, and that's who I used to canvass for. And I think I was, if you like, a fan of Captain Terence O'Neill, who could see the vision that he had to work closer with Lamass at that time. So at the end of the day, what will you be, if there was a new Ireland tomorrow, what would you? Wouldn't be offering unionism. I mean, unionism would be dead in many ways, but the people who saw themselves as unionists, the only two things that really would matter to them then would be their culture, to continue that, to build that in as part of society. And as Bill Clinton said, it's the economy, stupid. And I think there's an awful lot of people nowadays who in the 50s might have been just emotionally attached to United Ireland, but nowadays are working with the head, and they want the economies to look right. And if the economy looks right and the carrot is bigger than the carrot they have at the moment, they'll go for it. So I think unionism will look for those two things, cultural and the economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. I'll pass it over to Mike.
Well, when Jerry introduced me, he made very clear that if you read my CV these days, every single bullet point starts with the same four words: Mike used to be. So thank you very much for the opportunity to pretend I'm still relevant for an hour or so tonight. I am indeed from a British unionist background, but not, I like to think, in an unthinking way. So, for example, having been born in 1957, just in time to grow up through the Troubles, or given my childhood was framed by leafy suburbs in the east, being born in time to grow up adjacent to the Troubles. I'm very conscious, for example, if you read the great poem The Coasters by John Hewitt, he articulates in a way I could never match how my class, through their inaction and their casual thinking, contributed to what you had called the spread of the contagion over the city. So I'm not unthinking or uncritical about unionism. I also think of a quote from Edward Carson in 1920 in the House of Commons when his peers were preparing to govern this country from Stormont, and he cautioned against creating a government for sections and factions. He said, create a good, a fair and honest government for all. Well, 100 years on, and we had 51 years of unionist majority rule, and we've had everything since. Is anybody in this room going to put their hand up and said, we listened to Carson and we delivered a fair government for all? I mean, we sit here today, we have no government for anybody. So, again, I'm not uncritical of my British unionist background, and I don't look on it exclusively either. Again, Hewitt said I am an Ulsterman, but I'm also Irish and British and European. And importantly, he went on to warn that if you deny any part of that identity, you diminish who he was. And as we approach Brexit, how true was he? Because I think what Brexit does for many of us, and not just nationalists or Catholics, is deny a sense of Europeanness, which was incredibly important to who we are and who we wish to be. Would a new United Ireland be a warm house for unionism? The answer is I do not know. Because I've heard you legitimately for many years express your desire for a new unitary state on this island. Recently, I've also heard people talking about protecting the rights and the entitlements of the unionist British community. But what I haven't really heard, and maybe I'm not listening, but what I haven't feel I heard is we want you. And isn't there a huge irony for a leader of unionism to be sitting here saying, I haven't heard you say, we want you, when for 51 years you never heard a unionist Prime Minister of Northern Ireland really say, we want you. So for me today, it's not about talking about border polls or new constitutional arrangements. It's about relationships. It's about fixing broken relationships. And if you go back to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement 20 years ago, page 1, it is no accident. The first paragraph is about taking an opportunity for a fresh start to build new relationships based on tolerance, reconciliation, and trust. It goes on to talk about respect, but interestingly, trust comes first. And that's what I don't see at Stormont at the moment. There is a lack of trust building between the parties, and if you don't have trust, you can't do business, whether it's politics, buying a car, going out to the shops. We've got to fix the relationships. And my final thought is based on the fact I think we're always hardest on our own. I remember as a young man hearing that Nigel Clough, as manager of Nottingham Forest, was hardest on his own son, Nigel, who was in the playing squad. And I think it's in human nature that we are hardest on our own. And I think what is wrong with unionism is that we're not very good at building relationships. I met once a very senior member of the American State Department, and we were having a good conversation, and I said to him after a while, look, I'm not a career politician. Can we just talk naturally? And he said, yeah, I'm not a career diplomat, so let's just talk. And I said, well, go ahead. He said, do you know what's wrong with unionism? And I said, what? He said, your PR's crap. So we've got to start building those relationships. And there's another story I love. I don't know whether it's about a South American frog or a toad or whatever, but this story that if you take this particular little beast and you put it in a pot of cold water and really, really slowly heat it up, the frog dies because it doesn't sense the atmosphere and the environment around it changing. Well, the atmosphere and the environment around this country and this island and between these islands and between these islands in Europe and the world, everything is changing. And unionism needs to wake up. Otherwise, it's going to be that frog.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the first question I just want to pose to the panel is, so the first question I want to pose to the panel is, Mike's touched upon unionism's PR being quote unquote crap. Arlene Foster, current leader of unionism, when she was asked on a Patrick Keelty documentary about United Ireland, would she be open to it, said that she would consider leaving Northern Ireland because she would feel that it wouldn't be as open and as unionism, wouldn't be respected in a United Ireland. And Mike, I just want to go to you first, because you, along with Arlene, led unionism for 5 years. So first question, would you leave Northern Ireland if a border poll went yes for United Ireland? And two, what do you think of Arlene's PR offensive on behalf of unionism?
Well, David, my dear wife, who's in the front row, is a lecturer at Belfast Metropolitan College, so she's been off for the summer. She spent the last 3 weeks digging our garden. If you think I'm going anywhere. And as to the second part of your question, if you think I'm going there, you're bonkers. But look, if she's genuine about outreach, of course I support her, because it is the only way to fix this. We can get, is it cryogenically frozen, and come back in 10 years' time, 20 years' time? Well, guess what? There'll still be Republicans, nationalists, unionists, loyalists, and others. We have to find a way to rub along together on this piece of earth. That's the primary thing. And one of the things I liked when I tried to work with Colin Eastwood in the SCLP was he said, what I say, let's make Northern Ireland work, but measured in how good is our health service and our education system and prosperity. And I don't just mean how many pounds you have in your back pocket, although that's a very important element of the mix, but your well-being, your sense of well-being, mental health. We know we've got terrible records. It's not orange, it's not green. If we start working on those issues together, uniting Northern Ireland and the people who live here, then you've got a chance to look at other things in a way that is not contentious anymore.
Okay, Mick, thank you. Jim, on a border poll, would you leave Northern Ireland, and what do you think about Arlene Foster?
Definitely not. I'd probably be canvassing. The fact of the matter is, if I am going to canvass, I don't want an Iraq, and I don't want a Brexit, and I don't want just a border pool. Do I want in or out? I want to see the deal. I want to see what it looks like. I might like to have a Norwegian health system. I might like to have a secular country. I might like to have a Finnish education system, especially when 84% of our parents want integrated education and only 4% get it. So there's a whole lot of things that I would like, and I would like to see that deal in a 200-page dossier that told me what a new Union of Ireland would look like. And 100% I wouldn't leave it either way, to be honest with you. I do think, I mean, I know you shouldn't really comment about other people, especially when they're not here, but I do think it was a mistake. I don't know where it came from. She must have family buried here and everything else, and why would you want to leave all that? Never mind anything else. So it was a really reactionary comment. But no, I've always felt, just as Mike said, I mean, John Hume based his whole philosophy on Europe, and I heard him in 1976, and it coloured my thinking quite a lot. And I feel Irish, and I feel Northern Irish, or north of Ireland, if that makes you feel better. And I feel I feel British when I'm supporting Manchester United, and I feel European. And Britain has been very good to me, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it has been very good to many of us. And even the Labour Party, when I was in it, was not a million miles away from thinking of the Republican Labour Party. There were plenty in it who would have still supported the link with the UK at that moment in time. But we are where we are, and the demographics and the planets are becoming aligned, and there's something ahead that can't be ignored.
Okay. Sophie.
Sorry. that okay? Yeah. I've already left. I live in York now, so I had to come back to do this. But I didn't leave because it's no longer an orange state. I left because I was offered a good job. So
economics. There you go.
So that's why I did that. But I think on Arlene, I think she's still quite traumatised, and I think maybe that's why she said that. And maybe that's like maybe she's a bit stuck in what happened and to her whenever she was younger, and maybe that's why it's a little bit harder for her to be magnanimous towards other people. I don't know that she's necessarily like a very bad or bitter person. I just think that she might be suffering from trauma. But I suppose, like, if you talk about who can leave or who's going to leave, it's who can leave. And I think it's the people that don't have the social mobility to get away, to be able to get a good job somewhere else, that are probably feeling the most vulnerable about the prospect of United Ireland. So, like, a good way to put their fears at ease would be to include them in the process of designing the new state.
Okay. David?
Would
you leave? And what do you think of
Jim said
leader of unionism's comment?
Jim said he might be canvassing for the election. I'll definitely be canvassing the election. So there's a referendum. There's no question. But what I leave is absolutely no question of that either. The thing I would just say, we have a. If you're asking, I'm talking Protestant rather than Unionist, okay? Because I haven't voted for a Unionist party. I grew up there. I haven't voted from 2003. Trimble needed a vote, and I voted that way, and I've never done since. I find unionism their own worst enemy. They create this sort of Britishness that doesn't exist anywhere else in Britain when it suits and when it doesn't. But the thing that I would say really is, we've got to start with education with kids. If you're talking about going out on a referendum to start off for a New Ireland or and whatever that is, the detail of that will transform the vote of that within Protestants. So if you imagine now, not imagine, it's exactly what's happening now. At 4 years old, we divide our kids and we send them in two different directions, in two different systems. So we at 4 years old, at 18 they come out the other end, and we expect them to be adults and treat each other like brothers and sisters or cousins. But yet we've divided and we've split. We call it then shared education. I'm in construction, we build houses, and we build semi-detached houses. Two families living next door ain't shared nothing other than roof tiles. Shared education where I come into a house and a child comes into a school wearing a blue uniform and turns left, or a child comes in with a green uniform and turns right. In any country other than here is called apartheid. That is the only word for if in America and they were to come up with this thing that the blacks turn left and the whites turn right, or in France the Muslims turn, it's called apartheid anywhere. Yet we accept that, and that's the thing that Republicans need to look at. Unionists need to look at. It's accepted, and it shouldn't be accepted. Our culture is the level of what we accept as a culture, be that Republican or nationalist or unionist or Protestant, is so low that you're asking somebody then to transform. So you're going to ask somebody to vote in a referendum that their kids are separated from your kids at the age of 4, but you want them to vote to put them back into an education system that will be run by the Catholic Church. It's bonkers. Without detail of that, there is no... That isn't a... it's really easy to say, yes, I'll come and I'll canvass, that's great. And the aspiration of that is there, but without the detail of that and working it out, we're in St Mary's. I'm very conscious we're in St Mary's. But whenever the Catholic Church has control of a state system, of a school system in the south, and then you're asking for to unify a country, and you're asking Protestants to put their children in. The other night they were talking about straw men. The DUP and unionism and just create straw men. They create all these false things that will never happen. They work on fear. So that is the first thing that will be said, and you'll sway a middle vote that would necessarily want economically to be better off, and that'll be lost because of a simple issue that needs addressed.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Another part of this, the tenor of this debate, and I noticed this at the leaders' debate from the unionist representatives, that this tenor that now is not the time to have this debate. We shouldn't be having this debate at all. Again, Sammy Wilson was very aggressive against Peter Robinson for even suggesting that unionism should engage with the United Ireland debate. Mike, where do you come down on that argument? Is it time to have at least just the conversation? Should unionism be engaging, and how proactive should it be in that engagement?
Well, I think unionism should be engaging, because you shouldn't just engage in what you're comfortable with and play home matches. I used to say to Martin McGuinness, the problem is we never play away games, and we ended up in Donegal one night at a debate which was, I think, was it Hope University? It was a university in America, which I could never understand why they were coming to the wilds of Donegal in January. I mean, these people have Florida and Las Vegas in the summer. And Martin was late because it was snowing so hard. Anyway, we had a debate, and half the audience was Irish Republicans from Donegal, and the other half Irish Americans from New York State. And at the end of it, not because of anything I had said, but at the end of it, the big cue was to shake hands with me. And why? Because they knew Martin well. They'd never touched a unionist before. So we've got to get out, and we have got to engage. And we've got to engage in away games on difficult issues. It is not, though, my job as a unionist to make the case for a united Ireland. It is my job to make a case for the United Kingdom, and unionism has not done it well, and I would include myself in that, and we need to try an awful lot harder, but we also need to listen respectfully to the argument against. And Jim's right. I think to some extent it will be about the economy, and certainly if there is going to be a border poll at some point, please do not let it be like the Brexit referendum. Make sure you're doing it at the basis of maximum certainty about what happens if we vote for no change or we vote for change. Because here we are, 2.5 years after the Brexit referendum, and there's even less certainty than there was. And I suppose the economy is where you will have the least certainty, because one person will say X, another will say Y. But we also have to look at how we protect unionist British culture and identity. And I think, by the way, as Hewitt said, I am a mix. I don't believe in binary. I actually think binary is very unhelpful to the political process, and I'm not sure it's that honest. How many people on this island are pure Brits or pure Gaels? I mean, I've been out to the Somme when I was leader, and the battlefields and those cemeteries. There are ancestors of people who are very proud Irish Republicans today. So if we can get away from the binary, which is by definition divisive, are you Protestant or Catholic? Are you Unionist, Nationalist? Are you British or Irish? And look what I'm doing. I'm putting my side first every time. Every time. It's not, are you Irish or British? Are you British or Irish? If we can get away from that binary, we'll stop being divisive, and we might be able to be a bit more inclusive of each other. But somebody has to make the case about what happens to British and unionist culture and identity if we do, at any point, vote for change. And I was talking to a fairly known player from Dublin a while ago, and he was talking about a new agreed Ireland. And I said, well, of course, in the new agreed Ireland, unionists could be the perpetual kingmakers in Dublin. And he laughed and he said, look, sure, you won't exist. And I said, well, we mightn't exist as unionist parties because the union may have gone, but we will exist as parties there to defend or promote the values of the people who vote for us. And he said, oh my God. So be careful what you wish for. Can I just say one thing on education? Because I have, my whole time in politics, I have cried for a single education system. It seems to me, if you mix children from the age of 4 First of all, you give them like a virtual inoculation against sectarianism. It makes a lot of sense. But what I've realized recently is, because I'm from the unionist background, when I say let's have a single educational system, some people think I'm out to replicate the state system for everybody, and therefore to deny people, for example, maybe like yourselves who believe in the CCMS. I'm not saying that. I'm saying let's take the best of CCMS, the best of state, the best of indicator, the best of mediums, and put it all together and have the best in the world for all our children.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to make that
okay,
clear.
Thank you, Mike. Jim, is now the time to have this debate, and that's what unionism seems to
Well,
be.
it's certainly not right now, because, as I said earlier, I want to see the plan. I do think that the demographics and the week's a long time in politics, and we are where we are, and all that sort of thing. But it's looking like sometime in the next 5 years, there are going to be a lot of people thinking, right, Brexit has either happened or hasn't happened. We've had a second vote or whatever. I do think that personally, I think the DUP shot themselves yet again in the foot when they came out with great pride that they had now got a wall down the Irish Sea. Because if there was anything that was going to make Northern Ireland a bounding success as an economic strength, it would have been the power to have an economy that looked west or east and south at the same time without an issue, make it like Hong Kong. I think it might have been harder to get people to change their mind after that. So I think they blew that a little bit. And I think, to be honest with you, I think personally it will be 2022 when there is a vote. And I think we need to be really ready for it. My son-in-law, who's from Gweedore, says that the very first chapter of any book should look at all the options: the status quo, an independent Ulster, Britannia, a Dalriada, which I wrote about in the past, and a new Union of Ireland, and then go on and let each person. To be honest with you, I don't think it should be left in the hands of politicians. I think there should be a group of civic society put together, people from various sectors of health, business, women's groups. My wife would kill me if I didn't say that. And there is no doubt that that is the way. I love South Africa. I go there every year, academically and also for other reasons. And the whole end of apartheid started in Stellenbosch University back in the early 90s, late 80s. And I think our universities of Ireland have been painfully quiet about getting into the mix. And I think the universities of Ireland, maybe working with another couple of universities, perhaps from America, who have particular interest in Irish factors, should be the vehicle in which people can feed in their ideas. Because I think a Sinn Féin only led campaign to have a new Union of Ireland would either fail or just pass by 51. I want it, when it does happen, whatever happens, whatever the best choice is, I want it to win by 70, like the Good Friday Agreement, so that nobody is going to argue about it. And I know some people may not want to believe it, but if you actually look at the figures at the last two elections in Northern Ireland, of the voting population, 20% just vote Sinn Féin, 20% just vote DUP, but 60% in the middle, 20% who never vote, 20% who only come out on a Good Friday Agreement but will come out for a border poll, and 20% who are the Alliance Party, the Green Party, Ulster Unionists, SDLP, whatever. Those are approximate figures, but it's not the huge. We tend to think it's all just Sinn Féin and DUP. So to me, there's a very good big group in the middle, at 40, 60%, who we've really got to convince. And a lot of them are happy enough with the UK, wouldn't mind a new Union of Ireland, but I think, again, it's the economy stupid, and I think that we would find that probably the Republic of Ireland will probably vote with their hearts more than their heads come the day, because they may not think we look that wonderful at the time. I think America, I think Europe have invested hugely in Northern Ireland. And it's really, they don't want to give up on us. They've been investing in many ways for the last 30 years, and I know that they want to keep doing that. So I don't think the economics will be that difficult to pivot, but I do think it needs to be a very attractive package, and not just, I want to wear green. It has to be more than that to get across the line.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Sophie, you wrote a few years ago about unionism's need to engage with the United Ireland debate on this, and who knew you were blazing a trail for Peter Robinson. So do you want to give your thoughts on how unionism should engage and why?
There'll always be like intra-unionist kind of one-upmanship. So if, because the DUP have now said it, then some within the UUP felt able to kind of call them disloyal and inviting disaster and all those kinds of things. But that will like always go on because they're wrangling for power within that ethnic bloc. But yeah, you should prepare. You should always prepare for something that you think could potentially harm you or present you with new opportunities. But like thinking about it a little bit more, I think it's probably a bad thing to once again get people to decide what side they fall on in the national question. Because whenever that happens, then what you do is you prioritise a kind of like masculinist, militaristic, nationalistic type of politics, which means that any other issues that the people are trying to raise get pushed to the bottom because what you're doing is fighting for survival. So Irish Republicans will have to go out and kind of wave the flag. Unionists will have to hold the line. And all of the other things which are going on will just have to wait because they always kind of had to wait. And that happened to women within loyalist communities, unionist communities, and women within the Irish Republican movement who were told that once we secure Ireland, reunite Ireland, and the national question is solved, then we'll deal with women's rights properly. So because of that, then whenever things that kind of probably shouldn't have happened did happen within unionist or Republican communities to women, it was justified because it was all to advance the national cause. So if you want to put people back in that position where that's what they have to fight for, then you make those people, mostly women, vulnerable. So yeah, we probably should prepare, but I think that it would serve elites. It would serve men who are already safe and comfortable, and it would put people who aren't very safe and comfortable at further risk. So yeah, maybe debate it, but focus on other things for now. So, access to abortion in Northern Ireland first.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie. David, on whether we should be having this discussion now.
It's always going to be a discussion. There's every election there's a discussion. The DUP are the best at making it a discussion because every election they fill everybody with fear, and it's about a border poll every time there's an election. So for any to say that isn't is false. Brexit is a massive game changer in the Protestant community. Absolute. The fact that the DUP couldn't even see that and voted with it is unbelievable, really. That is the transformation that changes somebody's attitude because you've woken them up to realise, hold on, I'm not going to have as much money in my wallet, and things aren't going to be, the opportunities aren't going to be there. Our countries, the report recently Northern Ireland's going into recession or effectively in recession. Those are the issues that affect Protestant people. I hate this sort of divide though, because it's just about society. It's just about, and republicanism can't want to win. If you want to win, you're going to have an opposition team fighting it. Whereas if you create a society where it's a benefit to everybody, where the society is for the benefit of everybody, be that Irish Protestant or be that Irish Catholic. I did an interview for RTE after the stuff in MLA and the cross to the GA, and they kept terming, before we went into the interview, she said they couldn't understand this voice from the north that wasn't sort of what they normally hear from unionism, and so they termed me the Ulster Protestant. I was really uncomfortable with this Ulster Protestant. It was like I'm ashamed of what you think of me, and we've got to lose that. That we've got to be a people that is a society that can meet a brother and a sister, and we're all Irish. Be it some people have British links and can be both. They've got to create a society that's welcome and that's open. But it definitely comes down to creating a place where the economic benefit is there for us, the health service is there for us, the education system is there for us and our children, and the place is better. The argument has not to be a border poll and that's the end of it. It's like you've got to show us, it's starting the other way around. The question, is there a border poll? Yes, that's fine, but you've got to show what it looks like at the other side of that border poll. If the island unites, what does this look like? In detail, what does it look like? What is the aspiration for me to vote for that as a Protestant, Unionist, Loyalist, whatever? Is the opportunity going to be there for that? Not just rhetoric of we want a united Ireland, or we want, it's very easy to say, very broad statements. It's when it comes down to detail, and that, it's having a book and having a book written, and you read the end, and this is the story, and it's getting to that end of the story, so people can see exactly what you're asking them to vote for. So a border poll now, I honestly think it wouldn't be of any benefit. Do the work, and that's a different story.
Okay, thank you, David. A number of you in your last exchanges raised the issue of Brexit, and Brexit being a potential game changer and having a massive impact on this debate, because I'll start with you again, Mike, because you, of course, backed a Remain vote, and one of the main rationale that you put forward was you didn't want to give nationalism another reason to seek a poll in the breakup of the UK.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, I remember being in press conferences with you talking about it.
Well, what happened was when I took over the leadership, the kind of senior figure said to me, whatever you do, don't go near a debate about in or out of Europe, because you'll split the party 50-50. But of course, David Cameron called the referendum, so I had to. And we have a ruling executive of 100, so they decide. So we met up in Antrim. And I said, well, look, I'm going to propose that our party policy is that on balance we're better off staying in. But if anybody can persuade me otherwise, I'm listening. Tell me what Brexit would look like and what it would mean for Northern Ireland, and you can persuade me. And nobody managed it. And the vote actually was 99-1 in favour of staying in. Mm-hmm. But on the day of the result, I was up at the US Consul General's, was having his 4th of July party early, and two lovely young guys in their 30s came up and asked to speak to me. They said, just want you to listen. And the story is that they were nationalist businessmen. Some people would say soft nationalists. I think that's almost insulting. I would call them, say, notional nationalists. And what I mean by that is, if you said to them, would you like to see a united Ireland someday? In principle, they would say yes, of course. But if you gave them a border poll the next day, they would vote to remain in the United Kingdom. And two reasons for that. Number one, too busy making good money, having their children well educated and enjoying life here. And secondly, their identity, which was that multiple of Irish and European, was protected by the Good Friday Agreement that said you and only you define who you are. But what happened in their view on the 24th of June, when it was declared, was little Englanders came in over their head and did exactly what the agreement said they couldn't do. I deny you your sense of Europeanness, and as Hewitt warned us, they end up feeling diminished. And I think that's a common feeling, and not just among the nationalist population. So we have a lot of focus on what the border is going to be like, on trade and on tariff, and these things are incredibly important. But ultimately, unless we can get away from identity politics, which has plagued us for 100 years or 800 years, depending on what you prefer, we're going to be stuck. So I'm not a Ramoner, I accept the vote, but it's how we manage the vote. And in 2.5 years, it seems to me, we've done a pretty poor job at managing the vote, particularly in its long-term implications for people's sense of identity. Okay,
thank you, Mick. Jim, on Brexit, and has it been a game changer in its impact on this?
Yeah, well, I think it has been a game changer in that certainly it has divided society. I certainly still feel very European. My whole family feel very European with regard to that, and I feel very hurt. I also don't particularly like the characters that are trying to sell Brexit to us. They're not particularly people I would enjoy having dinner with. And they just don't appeal to me. And therefore that makes me a bit wary. I do think that, personally, I feel there will be a second referendum. I've been impressed by people who tell me that that is likely. And if there is a second referendum, 1.5 million people who voted for Brexit will be dead. And we're making sure they don't see doctors. And there'll be no antibiotics, you see, because they won't be able to get into the country. And second, I think, and also 16 and 17-year-olds will have a vote if there is a second referendum. So I think, personally, I think the DUP are damaged by the vote, whether we end up with a Brexit or don't end up with a Brexit. So I do hope that those who would be nationalist Republican will come out in their hordes to vote for it, to remain. Although it must be tempting. I mean, part of me, my Machiavellian side, part of me thought, well, if we do have a hard Brexit, that'll focus minds. But I have to say, just for the good of the people, I hope we stay in Europe and let Europe finish the journey that they have started. I remember 25 years ago, just serendipitously being in Delphi Lodge and meeting a lot of Eurocrats who spent the night telling me and my wife at that time their plans for Northern Ireland, and they want to show that within Europe they can solve a problem within their borders, and they were just willing to throw whatever expertise, even if Michael Gove doesn't believe in experts, that through their expertise and money. And we are only 1.5 million people. It's not that expensive to sort out the subvention, etc., even though the subvention may not be as big as people say. So my bottom line is, I think there's going to be a second vote, and I hope we all vote to stay part of Europe, because I think Brexit has been awful. And as I think everybody agrees here tonight, the worst part about Brexit is we really didn't know what we were voting for at the time. And let's not do that when we come to a border poll.
Okay. Sophie. Okay. Is Brexit a game changer?
Yeah, probably. We've I think it's probably shifted those who were like sort of benevolent on the union, willing to kind of go wherever they'd have the best sort of material quality of life. But then those were never the people who physically fought for the union or were incarcerated for the union. So those people would have sent their kids to university in the mainland anyway, and travelled a lot, and probably weren't as committed to the union as lots of other people are. We tried to do a similar thing in the PUP at the time, and tried to avoid taking a position because we thought it would be very divisive. So what we did was we tried to kind of put out as much information as we could on the referendum and what that would mean. I remember there being two kind of distinct groups within the PUP and how they wanted to vote. One group, which was mostly ex-prisoners who had benefited from peace funding and who understood the importance of the European backdrop to the peace process and all the funding that allowed them to do the work in communities that they did when they came to prison, wanted to stay in, and they stated that publicly and tried to encourage others to vote to remain. The other group, and I think this group are kind of emblematic of a lot of Leave voters, were quite pleased to vote no, because they said it's two fingers up to the establishment. Fuck you, we can do whatever we want. You thought we couldn't leave the EU, well now we're going to. And even if it's disastrous, it's disruption. And it's pretty interesting to watch disruption if what you've had before wasn't that great and nobody really listened to you. So there was definitely that group there too. The difficulty is, the problem wasn't the EU, the problem was global capitalism, and the solution isn't Brexit. The solution is socialism. So it's quite difficult to manage when what people were kind of hurting from, which was feeling like left behind, ignored, their quality of life had declined, we're presented with a solution, it's not going to be their solution, and so therefore just going to have less trust in informal politics to do things. So there are ways around it, but like it's depressing to have to keep talking about Brexit.
Thank you, Sophie. David, on Brexit, is it a game changer?
It is a game changer, and it's a game changer on one level simply because it's not an orange and green issue. It's an issue that affects all of us, and it's an issue that that actually unites right across the divide a lot of people. I have a 13-year-old daughter who would love a second referendum, and she thinks that why should she not get a vote and old people get a vote because they won't be here to live without the Brexit. That's what she said that several times to us, that I want the vote because it's my future and it's not theirs. So if you're over 70, you shouldn't get a vote. And I actually agree with Jim totally. I think we're getting to the point where it's just a mess. There's going to have to be another referendum or some sort of poll on it, but it's a game changer simply on one level. It's united across the divide of orange and green, and it's not a sort of Republican issue or against unionist issue. And with us here, it is. Everybody knows it hurts us most, and I guess we've got this kind of unity across the divide again against this kind of false approach that we have to have. We have to be as British as Finchley, and this sort of create a border and create a hard border, and all those issues have brought it all to the surface. But for my generation and my guys in work, like a lot of it comes down to economic opportunities. And if you're going to close those off, you're actually guys that would never have thought of any other, sort of in Republican circles, the purpose is for unity, so it's always there. Whenever you come into outside of that, it's not even discussed. It's never discussed other than elections when the DP filled with fear. But that is now a talking point. I work in construction and building site, and it's a talking point on a construction site. Because guys are realising their jobs and their livelihoods and their opportunities and the amount of business that's there potentially is going to be dropped. So it's a game changer simply on a very personal level because it affects personally people's wallets and their opportunities. So the answer is absolutely a game changer. If you're talking about unity, it's a game changer because you've opened the eyes to people who normally wouldn't look or even think of it. It would, my granny growing up, from the Shankill Road, and she would always say, you'd brought us out of United Ireland, something would come on TV, and she'd go, United Ireland, it's inevitable, but not in my generation, not now. And that's the attitude through, the whole way. But now that with Brexit isn't there. That has been removed because you're closing off opportunities for people.
Okay, and linked to the Brexit debate, obviously, is and very tangential to the border poll debate, is the threshold for success in a referendum. And some unionist leaders have posited that the threshold should be as high as 70% in some cases. That 50+1 wouldn't be enough. So I'll go to Mike on this one. What do you think the threshold? Should the threshold for a border poll be raised from 50+1? And if it should be, what should the threshold be?
It can't be anything other than 50% plus one. That's democracy. And I listened with great interest when Peter Robinson first discussed the notion that 50% plus one was not enough for constitutional change. 52% was good enough for Brexit. He doesn't have wriggle room. It's 50+1.
Okay. Thank you. Very direct. Jim.
Just to agree, I think in many places around the world they say constitutions shouldn't change unless it's over 60. But I've already stated it. I want whatever it is, whatever deal we get, I think it has to be resounding. And the reason why nobody's complained about the Good Friday Agreement is because it was over 70%. So let's get a deal together that over 70%. But I certainly totally agree with what Mike's just said, is 50+1. But make it 70.
Okay. Yep. Sophie, same question.
50 plus one. Yeah, 50 plus one's fair. Referendum's probably not the way to do it. I would go for like citizens' assembly or civic fora or deliberative mechanisms of some kind. 50 plus one's a little bit risky, and referendum's a little bit risky because you're always going to have people kind of unhappy with the result. Maybe some sort of weighting to the votes. So I think it would be interesting if you could work out either in Northern Ireland now or in a future United Ireland who would have the least power, so economic, social and political, and weight the votes in those ways so that the people with the least power maybe have 1.3 a vote, 1.4 a vote. People with loads of power who can move easily if they don't like it, they get 0.4 a vote. Not exactly in those ways, but I think that would be a good way to do it.
Okay. Interesting. David. David.
I absolutely agree with Jim and Mike. It's 50 plus 1, and every other election is 50 plus 1. But I absolutely agree with Jim. You want to sell something that is, you're not down to 50 plus 1. You want to sell something that is attractive and unifying a society. So, but 50 plus 1 is what I have.
Okay, and I want to start with you on my next question. Another common theme throughout this entire debate is that unionist politicians don't do a very good job of actually selling the union, selling UK PLC. Mm-hmm. What, in your opinion, are unionist politicians doing badly, and what are they not selling about Northern Ireland remaining in the United Kingdom?
I get in trouble for talking about unions. So, to voter, what the unionist parties to the general public?
Yeah.
I guess. How do I start? I grew up in a Presbyterian manse. Okay, my dad was a Presbyterian minister, and we grew up in the evangelical wing of that church before it became fundamental. And so, love your neighbour actually meant loving your neighbour. And the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritans were the hated and the people that were the opposite, where you weren't told just to pick them on the street, you were told to look after them and care for them and take them and look at them. When you took that across, that was the Catholic. That's what I listened to in a church on a weekly basis, and that's what people, my family, and lived by. And yet you had unionism shouting no surrender and never, 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 which is exactly the opposite of what the message they say. So they deliver a message and confuse a message. So I can never relate to no surrender, because the whole sort of Protestant message is you're supposed to surrender in the religious term, in the faith. So you had this conflict that I could absolutely never relate to, never understand. I could never understand why everybody had to have a flag and a lamppost as if I'm a goldfish, and at 50 metres I forget what I am, and I have to, so like, what? And 50 metres later I forget again. I could never understand how to force yourself on a parade through a place that nobody wanted you, whenever you're meant to love your neighbour, and if we don't get it, we're going to batter our way through. I could never. That was just alien to what. But a lot of then, as I got older, was this kind of posters of elections with flags behind them. So if you don't fly one on the lamppost, we're going to put one on every lamppost with a face in front of it. But we want this British identity, and I totally respect and totally understand the values of a British identity. I just think unionism ain't got it. I think whenever you've got equal marriage and they're opposing it here, whenever you've got on the abortion regulations here and you're opposing it here, whenever you've got different, this isn't. So you're arguing for a British identity, but I don't know what this is that you're arguing for, because this isn't what I see. If you go to London, this place is alien to it. This is a place apart. Is it? So for me personally, I lost total hope in unionism because of the message that is constantly this sort of sporadic 1 minute Sammy's on shouting like a prick, and the next minute, you know, there's somebody. Simon was here the other night, and he was great. Simon Hamilton was great the other night. He was told, but yet there's this. They go into monotone, and then they come back out in human, and I just could never relate. I could never understand. I could never relate to that. Because it's confusing for an Ulster Protestant as the RT plan. That's totally confusing. So I don't understand how Republicans ever understand what unionism is saying. And so I don't know if that answers the question. But
okay, thank you, thank you, Dave. So Sophie, how can unionist politicians better sell the United Kingdom?
Well, they could just, unequivocally support British rights for British citizens, like mostly British women, British people that maybe aren't just like them. But
They won't.
Unionism might appear not to make sense, but it makes perfect sense for the purpose that it sees as its kind of core. So why have unionists never sold the union? Well, because they didn't have to, because Northern Ireland was created specially for them. So Northern Ireland just was. British symbolism just was, and there never had to be a case made for it. And now that they have to make a case for it, it feels almost insulting, because it's like all of the kind of hegemonic or dominant identities in the world, white is dominant, so why would you have to explain what whiteness means? It's kind of the same with Britishness here. The reason that they, I think, don't support typically British values and instead exhibit this kind of Ulster nationalist identity is because it's not about, for them, being part of a broader union of peoples of different faiths and no faiths and different cultures across the British Isles. It's about power and control, and it's always been about power and control. And that's the politics that were practiced during the violent conflict here, and the politics that are being practiced now were practiced during the flag protests. So it's not that they don't quite understand that in Southampton people don't have loads of orange marches. It's that they understand that if you frighten people enough, they'll fall in line, and they do fall in line. It's happened since the 30s. Gusty Spence in his biography explains that they were given 10 bob to pick fights with Catholics after the outdoor relief riots because there was too much solidarity between Protestant Catholic workers demanding access to better pay and better conditions. So sectarianism was stirred up by the Ulster Protestant League or the United Protestant League. So there's always been this hierarchy within unionism. So the way that it kind of the way that it manages its people is designed for its own end. So there is a logic to it for them, probably not for anybody on the outside. So the way they could better sell the union is, now I don't support the 67 Act, I prefer decriminalisation, but extending the 1967 Act to Northern Ireland, defending the greatest British war memorial we have, which is the NHS, defending British trade unions, the welfare state, all of those things the British people on the mainland are proud of. But then if they did that, it would undermine the Ulster Nationalist Project, which has a class hierarchy within it. So that's why they don't do it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sophie. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with everything you've just said. They don't. The unions do not lead well. They do not lead them with British rights. Especially when it comes to women's rights and LGBT. And the Republic of Ireland is now leading us in that way on this island. And they make a big mistake in that they constantly play to their core. The core's going to vote for them anyway, but they only just seem to play to their core. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm probably the oldest person in this room, very nearly. And I've always been interested in politics ever since I lay in my bed and listened to Harold Wilson beating George Brown by 3 votes on my crystal radio, and I really became interested in politics about then. And that, there's no doubt, I mean, I did live in the People's Republic of Bangor at that time, and but you may believe it or not, it does exist. And but the bottom line is that there for 50 years, the Unionists made working class Protestants feel we are the people. And now that they're not the people anymore, they're mourning that loss. And now that after the Good Friday Agreement, the nationalist population have got their self-confidence and don't see themselves as second-class citizens, which they were by many people for 50 years, I think it's hurting them. And they're now really not too sure what we are the people means anymore, because they were promised, their dad told them that we are the people, but they don't feel that they're the people anymore. So I think the Unionists are very badly leading their people with a flag and a football team, and I'm embarrassed by it and I'm angry by it.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Bit of self-criticism here for you, Mike. So go on ahead. Why are Unionist politicians so bad at selling you?
Personal to mine.
I am. I know you did. I am. I'm sensing enough with the unionism bashing. I think Jim and David both allude to something that I'd heard expressed as, you know, if you stuck a Union Jack rosette on a donkey, it would get elected. Hey, it worked for me. So, you see, for people of my generation, the very words United Ireland are negative because they're synonymous with the IRA, with bombs and bullets, with coercion and force. In the same way, I have no doubt, for nationalists of my generation, unionism and the Brits have incredibly negative connotations. And so it came down to a numbers game. And we all know the numbers are changing. So I think the opportunity is to set our stalls out. As I say, it's not for me to argue for United Ireland. It's for me to argue for staying in the United Kingdom. And I'm talking about my generation's perceptions. It's not the same. Linda and I have two boys. PJ's 21, PJ's 23 and Chris is 21. Both delivered, by the way, by Jim. As an obstetrician, he doesn't work for Parcel Force or anything like that. You understand me? And actually, on the day of the referendum result, that Friday, the 24th of June 2016, I popped home mid-morning because I needed to pick up some papers, and those two boys were sitting in front of the TV watching News 24. They had never, ever watched the news before. I mean, the fact their parents presented it was probably the reason. I mean, how embarrassing could that be? But look, they were watching the news and they were really angry, to the point where I said, I will fund your first Irish passport, because I think that was only the fair thing to do. So if Peter Robinson says there's a battle on or there's an argument to be made, he's probably right. But rather than cast it just in a United Ireland or the United Kingdom, the way I would like to discuss it is like this. Let's go to where Jim delivered the babies, and let's look at the next child that's born across the road. What will we know about that child? Whether it's a boy or a girl, and relatively speaking, how healthy it is physically. But there's one thing more. Inside that child, in the same way inside every child born in this country, there is a spark of ability and creativity and talent. And are we doing our best to let that child find out what that spark is and to fan it out into a great forest fire of passion for life and for learning? And we're not. Because, for example, in our education system, we say if you are academically intelligent, you're up here, but if your intelligence lies elsewhere, you are down there. That is a crime against our children. So let's agree we can fix that. Personally, and I don't speak for my party here, marriage equality and abortion reform are absolutely critical to how I want this part of the world to progress. And if we can have those debates on issues and on rights and on values and do it in a way where we build our relationships between each other, who knows where it's going to lead? Okay. I'll still be here, but I'll be 6 foot that way. But my children or their children and yours, who knows what will they decide? But we can build something that is more equitable and that is more fair for us all.
Okay. Thank you, Mick. Okay, I've got one more question. What leader, just because it's been a bit of a beat up on unionism type, but I'm just thinking about the leaders of nationalism, the people who are going to have to go out and lead a campaign and convince people. So I'm thinking about the Mary Lou McDonalds, the Michelle O'Neills, the Colm Eastwoods, the Nicola Mallons. And Mike, since you've worked with Colm Eastwood and you've seen Michelle O'Neill and people like that close quarters, do any of the current leaders of nationalism worry you, give you pause, give you some concern about that a United Ireland would be a cold house?
Well, as I say, nobody has said to me, really, really, really want you in this new house. But to build relationships, I'll answer it this way, David. I got elected in 2011, and by 2012, I found myself leading the Ulster Unionist Party, and one of the big players at Stormont was Martin McGuinness, who I knew from broadcasting days, but not as a politician. And I felt, I have to build a relationship with this man. And do you know what we did? We went for a walk. We went for a walk, a long walk round the grounds of Stormont. And we started with the past, and I said, Martin, I don't like what you did, and I don't like you saying unionism left you no choice, because I believe if you pick up a gun or you detonate a bomb, you're making a choice. And he said, but you didn't live through what I had to live through. Every time we tried for a day in the sun, unionism slapped us down. And we realised this is going nowhere. We're never going to agree, but we've got mandates to build a better future. And we spent the rest of that walk building a relationship. And I know it sounds potentially petty, we went for a walk, but you know, times after that when we met each other, we said, do you remember the 2 Chinese tourists? Because when we were getting up to Carson's statue, there were 2 women, turned out they were Chinese tourists, they had bikes, they were pushing the bikes up the hill, we stopped, said hello. They said, is there any chance we can take a look at that big white building? And we said, yeah, come with us. And we took them around the side, the big security hut. And you could see they're looking at the hut and their bikes and thinking, what do we do with the bikes? Do we take them into the hut or out of the hut? A guy in a uniform came out, screwed his cap on, went up to the barrier, pressed the button, barriers went up, he saluted Martin, he saluted me, and we said, come on. And they're like, huh? And we got them up, we got the bikes parked, and we took them into the garage. When's the next tour? 5 minutes, we get these 2 ladies on the tour, please? Yes. Well, we shook hands, walked away, and they're like, who are these gods? And that was the start of a relationship. And I used to go and see Martin, and there were no note-takers and no special advisors, and I'd say, Martin, can you help me with this? Or he'd say, can you help me with that? We'd go away. There was a political integrity about Martin McGuinness. And until our political leaders build that sort of relationship where they can sit down confidently with each other, because I said something to Martin once, and if he'd gone public, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have lasted 5 milliseconds as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. But he never, ever mentioned it because he had that integrity in his politics. And that's what I want to see. I don't want to see people in the ground floor cafe, basement restaurant of Stormont sitting on their own, having their lunch. If you can't spend 15 minutes sharing your humanity over your lunch, where's the hope? That's what we want.
Thank you, Mick. Jim, on the current leaders of nationalism.
Well, I seriously think that would be very hard to follow what Mike's just said. Brilliant. I actually don't think rhetoric is going to win the day at the end of the day. I think it's got to be facts. I think people have got their heads screwed on nowadays. As I've said before, I think 20% of our population in the north are very emotionally attached to United Ireland, and I think 60% need to be convinced. And I think there are other ways of convincing them rather than just rhetoric. But I do think that Mike is just so right, and I personally, honestly, if you can imagine a vehicle that is above politics, that is civic society, a bit like you were talking about, Sophie, civic society working with the vice-chancellors of all the universities of Ireland, perhaps, as people can feed into it. So it isn't coming just from Sinn Féin. I think if this next 4 or 5 years or whatever is just driven by Mary Lou and Sinn Féin, I think it will be, you'll be talking 50+1. I personally think this is bigger than that. and everybody, including unionism, need to get their act together to sell it to whatever package they think. But I honestly feel strongly the EU would be very supportive of a certain way. I think the Americans would be supportive of a certain way. I think the Republic of Ireland would be supportive of a certain way. And I think behind their hand, the UK would be supportive of a certain way.
Okay. Sophie.
Is this like thoughts on nationalist leaders? Like what they? Okay. Nationalist leaders. Colm Eastwood. I wouldn't really want him leading the call for United Ireland because of his position on women's rights. So I would need that to be kind of transformed before I would have any faith in him at all. Mary Lou. I quite like Mary Lou. I'd rather have Bernadette McAliskey, but I quite like Mary Lou. I think I really like Michelle as well. I think there's a kind of like humour to them that's nice to see in politics. That they're comfortable with their positions, but not them as people. But for Sinn Féin specifically, they would need to have some sort of like very open and probably painful conversation on the use of violence to achieve strategic aims, because I think people would want to know if Sinn Féin and their voters, if they did support violence and if they always saw it as defence, how they reached that position, and if they would support it again and why, or if they're committed to kind of embedding non-violence in every level society. And by every level I mean there's an Egyptian activist called Mona El-Tahawi, and she has this good phrase called the trifecta of misogyny, and she says it about women, but you can apply it to everybody. If you think about it, United Ireland, you say, unless you're safe and free in the home, the street and the state, then you're not safe and free at all. So I think that if, particularly for Sinn Féin, given their past, were to have that conversation on violence and non-violence, I think it would really help.
Thank you, Sophie. David, on the current leaders of nationalism, and do any of them worry you and make you think that this could be a cold house?
I was here at the leaders' debate the other day, and Mary Lou was really impressive, really, really impressive. But yet, I don't think she could sell. I agree with Jim totally. From my background, people growing up, I grew up born in '74, so I grew up in the Troubles, and people from my background will always associate Sinn Féin and the past, and that's a really hard sell, So as impressive and as good as Mary Lou is, I don't think she or Michelle Neal can actually sell that across the divide. I suppose the problem they have is it's an easy sell to their vote, but yet saying the wrong thing at the wrong time will harm the vote across. You only have to look at a group of girls. So I'm just thinking of them. We're talking about female leadership. A group of girls that go off to a World Cup and get to the final, and they did more for the country, unifying us than politicians have ever done, really. And that's, as much as you want a United Ireland, or Unionists want the United Kingdom, have bashed Unionists all night, but until we unify the people here, neither really is viable. The first port of call really has to be uniting across the community. I joined the GAA 8 years ago when my son started playing, and the thing there's a different. We talk in Glenavy about green eyes, because you see things whenever you're sitting in a meeting and sort of nationalists, you're looking at green eyes. They're totally different than how Protestants will think, and the Protestants don't have the GAA, so they don't have a cultural. Culture's created mainly by sport and the arts, and the GAA is that. So you've got on the other side, they don't have that, so that is a void that is unexplained. But yet, once you bring people across, we have 30% of an under-16 team come from a Protestant background playing GAA on a weekly basis. Once you bring people across and they mix in a sort of national, sort of ordinary level, then it's different. But whether nationalist leaders can actually deliver that across, I don't, honestly, hand on heart, don't think they can, personally.
Okay, David, thank you very much. Okay. And just as we wrap up, I want to talk a wee bit about the kind of constitutional or civic social protections that you would like to see in, I know it's a bit hypothetical, but kind of your red lines about what you would like to see. So whether that's on healthcare, whether that's on women's rights, that you would like to see for within the context of a United Ireland. So, Mike, would there be anything for you that you would particularly like to see your top one or two protections?
No, red lines are poisonous and totally toxic to us trying to make progress together. So what I would like is that we recognise our common humanity, and that we focus not on what we can't fix or change, which is the past, and just focus on having a debate about that newborn child and what we need to put in place for that child to prosper. Because, for example, when we were about to sign off on a new programme for government, we realised, for the first time we acknowledged that for a child to do well at school, you can't just look at the Minister for Education and say, that's your portfolio. Because we know healthier childs do better at school than unhealthy children. So the Minister for Health has a role to play. A child in good housing will do better than a child in poor housing. So the Minister for Communities has a role to play. You've got to get the child to school and back from school, so transport has a role to play. Those are I don't want red lines. I want people to sit down and say, what do we want for ourselves and for our children? What is just? What is fair? What is equitable? And let's start talking about the fact that our identities are not binary. It's not Irish or British. It's not nationalist or unionist. Let's make this little part of the world as good as it can be, and let our children and our grandchildren have the debate about the constitutional status. Frankly, having been out of government and out of stormont for 18 months, and seeing the length of some of the waiting lists for the health service, and working with a non-selected post-primary school in Newton Arts, which is really struggling despite the fact that the teachers are turning it around, I'm more focused on those issues than anything else.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you. Jim,
yeah,
protection
I would love to start with a nice green beige cloth and let's all put in our ideas into the middle. Personally, I would like to have a secular country. Of course, we can have religions, will be whatever, freedom for all religions and for none, but I think it should be secular. I don't think it has helped. I think one of the happiest days of my life was a number of years ago when they had the vote in the Republic on the LGBT, and on the Thursday afternoon I watched the result coming through on RTE2, and I was just so full of pride, because this was the young people of Ireland saying, we've had enough of you old fogies. We've decided that this is the new Ireland that we want. And I think it will be very interesting to hear that on these social issues, Northern Ireland, all the polls votes exactly the same as the Republic of Ireland. But somehow we don't seem to have that influence over our politicians like they have in the Republic of Ireland. And I do think it's something just to think about, that if there was a new Ireland tomorrow, all political parties, apart from the Alliance Party and the Green Party, would have to, and the Labour Party in the Republic, would have to reinvent themselves. Because every other party, Fine Gael, Féile, DUP, Sinn Féin, Ulster Unionists, all are based on whether there's a border or not, or whether you thought Collins was right or wrong. And the fact of the matter is that once that's gone, you've got to reinvent yourself. I sat on a plane from Belfast to, or Dublin, to Las Palmas, and on left of me was a Fine Gael TD, and on my right of me was a Fianna Fáil mayor. And we drank quite a lot of wine, and by the time we arrived there, I was asking them which party was more left, which was more right. So the wine just had to keep coming because they didn't know. And that's a fact. So it's very personality politics, you know. So I think everybody needs to reinvent themselves. I think it's a great opportunity for the future. So that's the sort of Ireland. And it's certainly, everybody has said it, education, education, education. And it can't be under a church.
Okay. Sophie, your thoughts on protections in United Ireland?
Yeah, I agree with the idea of a secular society, desegregated society as well. That would give us another 1.5 billion to spend, and then we could avoid welfare reform. So that would be good. I think there should be some red lines. I think, for example, the right to bodily autonomy should be a red line. That's not something that should be voted on. So that would be the first one. If we're going to enter a new state, we should deal with the things that we haven't taken care of in the current state, or state. And I think that top of that list should be the victim's pension, because that's been left for too long. And along with it, redress for the survivors of institutional abuse. And then thirdly, I think that we should start including domestic violence stats in our security situation statistics, because our vision of security in Northern Ireland is still wedded to the idea of a political conflict and not violence within the home. So if we're going to create a new state, those are three things I think would help.
Thank you very much. David, on constitutional protection.
I can't believe I'm going to say I agree with the unionist. I kind of agree. There can't be a red line. You know, I suppose that there's ways of I'm just throwing out a thought, but there's ways that Scotland used to have more MPs in Parliament than the rest of England did. There's ways that you can have a Parliament that sort of you're protected because there's more politicians there for that area. But I suppose when I said earlier about apartheid education, I didn't mean that you drop the Catholic Church in the south and here up and you up the sort of Protestant system. I meant you create a system that unifies, and I suppose in one sense, moving forward, you've got to deal with the past. So I'm conscious that the past is there and hurting people and still hurting people, and people have lived through. I was blessed that I didn't have any family members that would have been died during the 30 years. But there's an element that needs dealt with, that has to be sorted to allow us to free to move forward. But to move forward, I want to be living in an inclusive, progressive island that everybody in society. Religion doesn't come into it. We're an Irish state. That whether I'm a Protestant Irish, an Indian Irish, a Catholic Irish, whatever, we're Irish here, and we'll build a state that's inclusive and welcoming and warm, regardless of your background, regardless of your history. David Trimble said a thing, and I remember back in sort of 98, 99, he used to always quote sort of, because you've had a past, it doesn't mean you can't have a future. And it's that kind of attitude we need moving forward, that we create a united kind of community across. You know, it's about society. This isn't a religious thing, it's about creating a society that we all want the best for our kids and our grandkids and ourselves living through or moving into. But I don't think red lines with the thing are helpful. I think that you create barriers that then make it hard. But I definitely think we need to deal with the past, and we definitely need to come up with the book of what the future looks like in detail, that can be easily and simply sold and shown, and then move forward from there.
Okay, thank you very much, David. And we are out of time. Can I just ask you to give 2 rounds of applause, one for the panel, Mike Nesbitt, Jim Dornan, Sophie Long and David Honeyford. And last but certainly not least, give a big round of applause to Féile and Phobail for hosting this discussion. It's been really interesting. And thank you for sticking with us for the last 90 minutes. Have a safe trip home.